Hi, camera.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I
Good.
hope you weren't waiting too long.
No, it let me in.
Yeah, I saw that. I looked at it. And I was like,
I
wait,
was
it asked me to join the meeting. I was like, okay, let me go ahead and join a meeting that I thought I was starting.
like, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm just here to make sure you guys get set up.
Okay.
So let me go ahead. Should I be making you a host or would I be making Amy a host?
You can make me the host because I'm gonna
Okay.
be hosting. She's gonna focus on moderating for this one.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And I'll probably just add Pranshu when he joins because he'll be controlling the Zoom.
Sounds good. You have all hosting privileges, so you'll be able to admit folks as they come in, but there may or may not be a waiting room on here.
Okay,
So
that's what I wanted to check. I think I can.
let me do.
Oh, enable waiting room. Okay.
You got it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I am going to be multitasking. I can hear you, so if you need me, just holler.
Okay. I'm just gonna practice, make sure my screen share works
Okay,
and all that jazz.
looks good. I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Alrighty. I'm just gonna practice my script, so we'll both
Go
be
for it.
I don't think we need to record yet, right? Oh, you're muted.
No, it was already on when I started, and then I've just been and I didn't have hosting rights yet, and I forgot to just take it off when I got it.
It's just gonna be real awkward. Everyone comes in and is like, "Is this thing on?" Like, oh.
And Dr. Moore is here. Should I admit him? Yeah, or do we need to talk? Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks. Hello.
Hello, Amy. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm super excited about today. There I am.
Oh, in your fancy library.
I think I need all the help that I can muster to help me.
Stop.
Help me make it look smart today.
Oh my word. I don't know.
I'm even wearing glasses.
I mean, if that doesn't do it, then
I don't know what else will.
Oh, we're so excited to have you here.
Yes.
Now, I did share those prompts with you, so I hope you got a chance to look at them. I didn't hear anything, so I assumed everything's fair game. Nothing was really edgy.
You know, so I figured that this is going to be a conversation, and so, you know, whatever comes up will come out.
Yeah.
I'll be as open and as honest as I can be. I don't know everything, and I don't profess to know everything. So what I don't know, I can't answer. And what I do know, I will.
Beautiful. That's all we ask. So brief introductions. I'm Amy. We've gotten a chance to chat. So founder and director of SDEIB, and then I will let my co-board members introduce themselves.
Hello, Dr. Moore. I'm Pranshul Srivastav, and I'm in the marketing division of the SDEIB and heading the social media part of it. Glad to see you today.
Thank you.
And good morning. My name is Camera Cobb. I am one of the newest board members, first year MBA here at Georgia State at Robinson College, and very excited to hear from you and just to have you here today. Appreciate you for joining us.
Absolutely.
So a couple things, just so that you are clear on kind of what's happening when. We're going to have Camera kick us off. So she'll have some slides to share and just kind of talk us through general stuff about our organization, sort of norms and expectations for the session. And then she will introduce you with the bio, introduce me with the bio, and pass the torch to me to moderate our conversation. After we chat, and it's really quite flexible. Most of the time, like I don't want to force a conversation, but really most of the time we're scrambling to wrap things up. But we really want to make sure we leave ample time for audience Q&A. And with that audience Q&A, you might even hear from our board members, right? Like we really welcome everyone to kind of just chime in with their curiosities and questions. That would also be a great chance in case you felt like there was something else you had wanted to say before, right? So really very flexible. As we finish up the moderated conversation, I'll pass it to Pranshul to run that portion. And so he'll be able to kind of take back over the screen and kind of moderate. I'll be stepping back at that point. Now, Camera, do you remember how to do, I think you do, because you're the one who did it in the first place, like the spotlight and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, all that jazz. Okay, Camera's our tech guru. She solves all the Zoom probs. She's a champion. But yeah, let me just chime in. I'm gonna check my email really quick. We got, if you don't have any questions, Dr. Moore, then we are set to just kind of chill, right? Until we let people in at 12. So if folks need to run the restroom or get a drink, any other questions, concerns?
No. I see April Williams is on, but I didn't get a chance to say hello to April.
Yeah, April's one of our advisors. So she sets up the Zoom calls with her sort of official Zoom account for the school, but she may not be able to be actively in this session.
Yeah, she said she was dual working, so she might hop in a second.
Okay, no worries. I just didn't want to overlook anyone.
Lovely. Yeah, we have a couple other board members, but some conflicts, unfortunately, this week. getting tight with
That's
our class
phenomenal.
schedule. So lots
Yeah.
going on, lots of assessments and all that jazz. But
And everyone's an MBA student?
yes, yeah. And so now the attendees may or may not be, right? Our primary audience, we're essentially a small business, right? We're growing. We're trying to get more followers. We're trying to get more consistent attendance. But A, the struggle is real in academia, right? To get folks to commit to anything. But B, we are advertising our events both internally at GSU, open to everybody, but really only getting the word out right now to business folks, which is fine, because obviously that's our focus. And then we have also been putting our events on Eventbrite. And so we're able to bring folks in from outside of our network. My husband's getting his MBA at Tech, and so he shared it with their group. So we might have some folks. So it's hard to say who's coming from where. My aunt came to a session. You don't know who's going to show up. But it's fun.
I'm sure she had amazing questions, right?
She was cute. Looks like, hey, camera, our Eventbrite people haven't received a meeting link. I don't know if she can hear me. She might have stepped away from the computer. We've had different technical problems throughout as well, so we're learning, but I don't know how many folks we had register, but that's the perk of having a partner that does. Let me see. I can at least share it with him.
This is event number what?
Oh, wait, he said inbox just updated from the past 2 hours. Okay, I'm sorry. What was that?
This is event number what for you guys?
Well, probably event number like 6 or 7 total, but in this series. So we were excited to kind of put some more structure onto things as we came in. So this whole fall has been dedicated to our diversity deep dive series and your guest final and 4. And we, before that, we did an anti-racism workshop, which was really cool for us. And other than that, we've had a very general introduction to diversity in the workplace sort of session, but that was really just kind of getting our toes wet of programming. We're hoping to keep offering those workshops periodically because they were a big hit with the folks that tuned in. It was one of those more, not a whole lot of people registered. And of course, probably the folks that need it most didn't register, but of the folks that were there, it was really meaningful and great. So we want to do those workshops more. And then
any kind of edgy or thought-provoking presenters that are kind of stretching people to think about or talk about this in a way that was different than you'd imagine?
Not so much yet. And, part of this is this balancing act that we're playing, and we don't have all the answers of, what's going to get folks in the door, right? Like what's going to get folks signed up. And in business, it's all about, the name tag, right? The business that's associated with it and the networking opportunities. And so that was kind of our priority with this one, and just kind of getting an overall look at what DEI looks like at Coca-Cola, Morgan Stanley, Truist, and now Warner Media. And so we were able to, that was all still pretty safe, to be honest, but interesting because it got behind the veil, right? Our spring series could potentially lend itself to more edginess, but I would love to pick your brain about that. Some ideas of how we could engage that and how we could bring that type of programming in, because I think it's what's needed. Our spring series is making diversity your business. So we're going to be highlighting different, whether it's entrepreneurs, or I really want to get a social media influencer in there somewhere, but it's just impossible to get in touch with people because everyone's in their DMs, but we'll see what we can get done. And just other folks in different roles that have incorporated diversity, equity, and inclusion as a core component of what they do. So one of the women that I've been talking to is a registered nurse, and now she's doing a lot of discussion about equity in healthcare. Another person actually runs an interview company, and he's a white cisgendered male. He's very aware of his privilege, and he ties that into everything that he does. And he hires only young women of color and empowers them and trains them with skills and gives them good wages, right? And so he's built that into his model. So that's another take on being involved with DE&I, right? You don't need to be a person of color to care about DE&I. But yeah, so like that'll be interesting because it's much more varied than this fall series has been a little bit more uniform. But that's where we are now.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I was just wondering what the expectation might be from the attendees in terms of, oh, we've heard that before, or what's new, what's different. Why should we listen or care to what you have to say about this?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think part of the struggle is we don't necessarily have consistent attendees, right? I think people tune in when they can. We have had some struggles with percent of actual attendance versus registration. So I think that's partly just the culture at GSU, though, to be honest, because I've seen it across the board. And
that's the culture of being able to register virtually, having programs during the business day, and then forgetting or having things that come up and compete with for your attention. I work with another organization called C2HR, and it's human resources stuff, and they have events, and we have a DEIJ roundtable, and it's the same thing for us. We get many more registrants than we do actually attendees. What we have found that is helpful is that we'll send out an update like 10 minutes before it's to start and be like, hey, don't forget today is this thing, click here to join.
Yeah.
That has been somewhat helpful, but I don't even know if we've scratched 50% from registration to attendee.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, so don't feel bad.
Anyone, but yikes. Yeah. So I don't know. I would certainly love to hear any ideas you have about what types of content we could bring in, because we don't mind rocking the boat. That's why we created this organization, right? Is to bring these conversations to light. A big part of what we've discussed as well is what's our role within the university. And we've really settled on education and community building right now. Yeah. So not so much like policy and trying to make those changes just because we don't feel, we're at that stage yet. Maybe down the line we can be that voice, but we are really focused on educational programming. So bring on the edginess.
I think the hard part about creating edginess is that the people who typically tend to be around this as an issue are all highly aligned.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
And so without a concrete way to introduce an opposing view, it's going to really be hard to have, to some extent, even the conversations we need to have around this as a society in order to move the issue forward.
Yeah.
I think people who tend to come to these things, if it's voluntary, come because it resonates in some way.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're seeing, right? Like I said, that anti-racism workshop, most of the folks that I don't think there were very many white folks on that call, right? Like there was, and it's the type of thing where a lot of people don't want to be uncomfortable, right? And like you said, the people who understand and believe in it, they're already on this journey, right? They may not benefit from like intro level type programming. So
that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to figure out how to get the people in the room who need to be in the room, which has been just quite frankly part of the issue. There have been some instances from a corporate standpoint where we've told some people like, you got to go get this training.
Yep.
The fact that you've made this comment and you made it so openly,
yeah,
there are some things you don't know.
Yeah.
So go sit here, get this training. But apart from that, people who need to hear it don't get it.
Yeah. Well, what's the answer? Tell us.
Oh, I wish if I had the answer, you wouldn't have been able to get in touch with me. I'd be leaving Good Morning America.
That's right. That's right. And that's the thing, right? It's like you can break through in this industry and like you can reach people But I think you're still right. You know, I'm thinking about Nzinga Shaw. She's a huge name in Atlanta. I don't know if you're familiar, but yeah, I was like, I figured you would know her name. And, you know, I met her at National Black MBA Association's conference, and I heard her speak. She was the highlight of my conference. And I actually met up with her in town. We got a cup of coffee, chatted a bit, so supportive. And I invited her to our spring series, and she said, let me just, yeah, my pro bono rate is $1,500. And I was just like, okay, like, that's our whole budget. Like, and I respect that, because, you know, she was saying she just came from an event where she, you know, came onto the stage after George W. Bush and was paid $25,000 for 30 minutes. I was just like, cool. Like,
yeah, no, there's, you know, wherever an issue exists, and you know this from just regular business school, right? There's money to be made. And this is a big issue. So there's big money in creating solutions around it. The question is how effective are your solutions? I mean, and that's the struggle, I think, for any organization of any size, and for people even on a personal level.
yeah.
So. All right, I'm gonna have to, I love the conversation, but it is 12 o'clock, so I have to keep us on time, keep us honest. I'm gonna go ahead and admit everyone, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Camera.
Mm-hmm. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the SDEIB fourth and final iteration of our Diversity Deep Dive series. Today, we are being joined by Mr. Traron Moore, Traron Moore of Warner Media. And I am so excited that you all have decided to join us today. Before we get started, I want to share a little bit about SDEIB, who we are and what we represent. So SDEIB stands for the Society for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Business. And we are an organization that strives to build community through education, empowerment, and networking related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in business. And we have a multitude of ways that you can connect with us. Feel free to, I'm sure one of my colleagues will drop a hot link in the chat where you can follow us and connect with us on all of these platforms. We want to hear more about you. We want to connect more with students at Robinson and of course, eventually expand. And these are all of the platforms in which you can connect with us. So for today's session, we have a wonderful discussion, moderated conversation that will host the bulk of our event. And then we will transition into audience Q&A, where you all will get an opportunity to ask questions of our guests. And then a reflective share out, where you all will be able to share highlights of the high points that you got from the conversation. I just want to set some expectations about the conversation today. Of course, this conversation can be sensitive for some. And so we want to make sure that you always assume the best intentions, keep your camera on if possible. Please hold questions until the latter Q&A portion of the session and remain muted unless called upon during the Q&A. Now I'm going to introduce to you our guest of honor. Dr. Traron Moore serves as the Corporate Director of HR for Warner Media. Traron has enjoyed a more than 20-year career in human capital strategy. During his career, his leadership has driven innovations in enterprise-wide organizational development interventions, including programs to enhance leadership, build trust, and increase engagement. Dr. Moore is known for his practical and pragmatic sensibility, leading the examination of opportunities from alternate perspectives, quickly creating approaches to situations that are a great mix of situational analysis and common sense. Dr. Moore holds a number of certifications, including HRCI's PHR, and the SHRM SCP, both senior level HR designations. He's also a certified in Sherpa, executive coaching methodology, and PRO SCI, change management. Dr. Moore earned his Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from Tuskegee University, an MBA from the University of New Orleans, and a doctorate in business from Georgia State University. He has expertise in generational differences and employee engagement. Dr. Moore considers himself a business leader who happens to work in the HR department. And this conversation will be moderated by the SDEIB founder and director, Miss Amy Smith. Amy Smith has been an educator and innovator for the past 11 years, living and working all around the world, from Venezuela to China to Indonesia and back to the United States. She's earned a master's in the art of teaching and learning from the University of Colorado at Boulder, as well as a master's in education and international teaching from Framingham State University. After leaving the classroom in July 2020, she has continued inspiring youth through tutoring. Presently, Smith is pursuing an MBA through GSU's Robinson College of Business. In February 2021, she founded and is acting director of the Society of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Business, where she develops and implements programming related to DEI through a lens of business, filling a stark void in the university, as well as the broader business world. Smith and her board interact with key university leaders and broader networks to bring innovative programming and unique learning opportunities to the students of GSU and beyond. Smith is keen to engage with DEI efforts more intentionally, pulling on her strengths as an educator, as well as her grit and hardworking attitude to break through barriers and find relatable and achievable ways for businesses to demonstrate growth in inclusivity and equity in meaningful ways. Now I would like for you all to welcome Dr. Traron Moore of Warner Media and Amy Smith.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Moore, for being here. I wish we could be sharing our awesome conversation we were having before we even started the session. So we'll just have to get people caught up here in our discussion. My first question to you is quite open. What is your definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion? What does it mean to you?
I think that's a great place to start. I think you could ask 100 people and you get probably 100 variations on that answer, which in some ways maybe even represents part of the problem that we've yet to agree what we think diversity, equity, and inclusion should mean for us. But for me, I would say diversity is around the dimensions of a person. And it goes much deeper than if you're Black or if you're white or if you're male or female or cis male or cisgendered. It goes into a lot of facets of who a person is and can be, whether or not they were raised as an only child, or whether they have many siblings, or whether they came from, the rural portion of Alabama, or whether they grew up in a big city. All of those things can in fact impact diversity. Equity is, to me, around how we make things fair. And then inclusion is how we hear or allow those voices to be heard during conversation and when, having a seat at the table and making those decisions that impact business. And I think when you put all of those pieces together, I think it can create a meaningful environment where you have different voices for a variety of reasons, all being heard at the same level of volume. And so it's not that one person is louder than another in a room simply because of their seat of privilege that they may have based on position, based on upbringing, based on education. based on any of those things. And that there's truly, so I think at the root of it, and that there's truly a real desire to have that to be the case. So that's what I think of when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, those are very powerful definitions. I like how you said, you know, diversity is about the individual person, right? And embracing those different dimensions. Equity is all about fairness, and inclusion is that everyone's heard. And all together, it's really this sense of environments, creating a specific type of environment. So how would you describe that environment and culture within Warner Media?
So I think Warner Media gets to be a little special in this sense. We're storytellers. And so I think because of that, we have a sense of responsibility for diversity and equity and really inclusion in a variety of ways, not just what we do internally for our employees, but also externally in terms of the products. And by products, in this case, the media content that we produce and put forth. And so I think it means a lot for us to take that responsibility seriously. And of course, I think another dimension of that we have responsibility for is kind of in the vendors and in the B2B stuff that we do in order to make all of this happen. So when you ask what it's like at Warner, I can tell you it's a big deal. We make a massive investment. And, you know, and it's funny, I love what we do and I love the things that we do, but I'm not one of those people that's like, no, we do it the better than everyone else, or this, you should watch our shows. You definitely should watch our shows, but there are definitely other things and other reasons to be around us as a company. Warner Media is fun. I mean, it's the entertainment industry. And, you know, how many people get to, when we were going into the office, you get to go to work and walk past the, you know, life-size Batman figurine or just any of our other characters that just are part of our culture. So Warner is fun. We take it very seriously that we are diverse in our content that we produce, as well as how we show up from a leadership perspective internally for employees.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more. You know, we have this, you know, the broad Warner Media statement that y'all believe in the power of stories. And you've articulated nicely how that relates to actual programming, of course. And you just touched on how that is also reflected in your leadership and in your employee structure. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, on that internal aspect of the power of those stories? Sure.
So I think the best way to explain this is this past weekend, I had an opportunity to go see a play. The name of the play was called Thoughts of a Colored Man. It's on Broadway, and it's probably one of the best plays that I've ever seen, because as I watched it, there were so many things that resonated for me. And it gave me a tremendous sense, and this sounds a little, I don't know what the word would be, but it sounds a little like maybe not for real to say it, but it gave me a tremendous sense of being seen. And it was something that I really had not ever put a lot of thought into. I knew the importance, but walking away from that experience, I was like, this is what that means for people. This is how that lands on folks when we get it right for them. And so I was like, okay, I recognize the value. And so having walked away from that, I definitely understand as a leader what it means internally when we get it right for our employees and how it lands on them because they have felt seen and valued. From a leadership perspective, DEI is about making sure that people can look at leadership and to some extent know who they're looking at, Just because a white cisgendered male is sitting at the front of the room, it doesn't mean that that person grew up in what we would consider to have a silver spoon. So it's important that when we look at our leadership, that number one, we know their stories, we know who they are as people, we know who we're looking at, but then also too, from a very physical standpoint, that they're representative of the workforce. And that I, as a Black man, can look up and see, oh, there are other Black men of leadership and higher levels than myself that I can aspire to, and then know that it's possible. And so I think that's the biggest part of it, is seeing that there are great examples and then holding that it is a possibility for me as well.
Great. And I know that, we touched just briefly on this, right? The different roles and the different leadership roles specifically. When we look at the DEI roles, right? What is that landscape like within Warner Media? And within that, if you were to give an elevator pitch for your own position, right? What would that be?
Sure. So I think first I have to start by saying, unfortunately, I'm not an SVP just yet. I am a lead people partner for our corporate human resources function. And what that means is that I'm responsible for HR and human resources kind of strategy for the communications organization, the HR organization, and for legal. And so a lot of people think it's very interesting that I get to be HR for HR, because why would an HR person need HR help? They do. And if I had to give a short, elevator pitch for my job, I'd say it's very much akin to being a doctor for a physician, a therapist for a counselor, in as much as you get to help experts take care of themselves and take care of the others around them. And, and there's a tremendous amount of fulfillment in doing so. When we think about our DEI jobs, our DEI, our diversity, first of all, let me go back and say so Warner Media is a newly formed organization, which is composed of Legacy, HBO, Turner Broadcasting, Warner Brothers, and Time Warner Corporations. A couple of years ago, when that change happened, we hired a woman named Christy Harbager to come in and be not our DEI person, she was our Chief Inclusion Officer. And she was very specific that she wanted her title to be inclusion. Her perspective is that diversity exists in nature and in this organization already, and that the real work is around how do we get those voices amplified to the point where they can all be heard at the same level and same volume. Paraphrasing, not her words, but paraphrasing. Out of that, she has since become our communications leader, which diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of the communications overall organization. And there are a few handfuls of jobs in that department that range from everything from coordinating activities between the ERGs to sending out pulse surveys. The employee engagement survey comes out of that group. Our B2B, as well as making sure that there's diversity in the content that we create and the content that we show on air. So there are a small variety of jobs done by a small handful of people. The department in size is probably maybe only about 30 people total, which is a pretty big DEI department for an organization our size. We're only about 30,000 or so employees worldwide, but that's a pretty big department. Most organizations won't have departments that large.
Yeah, that's what I've kind of been picking up from our other sessions in this series. So that's actually quite an impressive number. And it sounds like y'all have also kind of infused that it's not really just this little subset of HR. It's really quite layered and integrated.
Yeah, so our DEI is not even part of HR technically. Yeah. They're part of the communications organization, and the biggest part of their job, I'd venture to say probably 60% of their job is making sure that we do a good job of making sure that there's DEI in the products that we put out and how those products get put together. The other 40%, we concentrate internally on making sure that we're doing a good job and removing some of those barriers and roadblocks and understanding kind of some of the problems, if you will, as they exist in getting people of color and women specifically to certain levels of leadership. I think in general, we've done a fairly good job of having women in leadership. I think there's still some room for opportunity, some room for improvement, both for getting more women into leadership as well as getting more people of color into leadership.
Yeah. So when you consider these different interventions, these different kind of goals that y'all have set for yourselves as an organization, how far do you feel like Warner Media is in that DE&I journey, right? So what, along with that, what opportunities are still present, right? What's on the horizon? What are you guys really wanting to focus in on?
Sure. So I think that's an interesting question. I think DEI is one of those journeys that I don't know really has a true destination. I think there's always more to be done. I think we can't afford to ever kind of say, okay, we've done this much and that's, you know, we're 50% there and we're going to do another 50% and then we're going to be done with this. I think it's one of those things that really speaks to our culture and our American society around how and whether or not we're ready and willing to deal with structural racism. And I think that is part of it, but I think every corporation as a good corporate citizen has a responsibility to tear as much of it down internally as we can. And I think in terms of Warner Media, I think we've done some pretty good things in terms of being able to take down the structures that keep people of color and women from being able to succeed at the same rate and levels as white male counterparts.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that, right? Like what
Sure.
does that look like?
So I think one of the biggest things that we've done is where we recruit from. We had a very big history of recruiting from only certain schools, and unfortunately, those certain schools yield more of what we already had, which in many cases was well-educated and smart, but white men. And recruiting more of them from these institutions, just you can't achieve diversity if you kind of go to one source and that's what the source turns out more than anything else. And so we've diversified where we recruit from. We specifically go after, we recruit at HBCUs. We have a whole, and that's another thing we do too. We have a whole diversity recruiting department that's geared towards creating relationships and then leveraging those relationships to yield diverse candidates for our roles that we're looking to fill. And that's probably at least another 15 people in that department. And that's their entire job, is to go out and figure out how do we get more diverse applicants into the pool. Because it's not, I don't think anyone who's worked in DEI, I don't think any of us would say that the idea is that every time a role opens, you hire a woman or a person of color to fill it, and that's how you fix the problem. I think you have an impact in that way, yes, but I think in doing so, you create another potentially maybe even worse issue by doing that. So we create diverse panels, and that's one of the things that we do. We recruit from diverse schools. We recruit from minority institute, the HBCUs. We recruit from minority organizations like the Black MBA Association. And I think those are some of the more creative ways that we've kind of looked at how do we increase our internal diversity. One of the things that I think is really cutting edge that we're trying to get good at is amplifying diverse voices within our organization. And one of the ways, if anyone is interested in knowing how that happens, you've seen those questions on employee engagement surveys that, diverse opinions are respected. Or I feel heard as an employee. Well, if 70% of your organization is white, and that means that 70% of that answer will be from that group of people. And I think it's about how do you slice and select portions of the data so that you can really get at the groups of people. So it would be an interesting slice to see, how do women answer that question? Or how do people of color answer that question? Or how do people under the age of 35 answer that question? Or how do people over the age of 65 that are still in the workforce, how do they answer that question? And I think then you can be able to really truly see, like, oh, if we remove certain cuts from the data, do we still value diverse opinions as much as we thought we did when we looked at it in aggregate?
Yeah, that would be very telling, I would imagine, for anyone.
So that's what we're working on now, things like that. And trying to be much more judicious in how we use data to help us make decisions.
Nice. And in that realm of inclusion, do y'all have any sort of employee resource groups? Or I know that that's kind of a hot thing, right? What other efforts have been made internally for that sense of inclusion and belonging?
We have extremely active employee resource groups. And we have all of the ones that you think of. I won't go through and name them because I know I'll miss one, and then I'll be like, crap, I should have named that one. But no, all the ones you can expect, I will name some. We have the women's one, we have the Black employees, you have differently able, veterans, Latino. And those are the ones that come to mind, but all of the ones that you would expect any large company of more than 5,000 folks to have, we have. They're extremely active. And because we are who we are in terms of the content and the things that we produce, we're able to really pull off some really interesting and fun events within those ERGs. Like, imagine being able to get a Don Lemon to host one of your events because he's our CNN on air talent. And LGBT, that's another big one that we have as well. I don't know how we missed them because the Pride season just passed. But yeah, I mean, imagine being able to pull off things like that where we're able to get big name people to come and sit or be a part of these very important conversations simply because they're our employees too. So it's really fun and interesting.
Yeah, what do those ERGs look like internally? So, everyone talks about having them, but
Yes.
How they're actually used can be a game changer. We've talked to some groups where, and more independently, right, in my own conversations where, yeah, we have one and they meet once a year and talk, and the president of the company sits in and listens, but that's really it. And so that doesn't seem very engaged. I'm super excited given how active you're saying these groups are. So what kind of stuff happens within these groups? How frequently are they meeting? What kinds of activities are taking place?
Sure. I would say they probably are having an event at least monthly. If my email is any indication of what the activity is like, something's happening at least monthly with these. Some of the activities, to give you a sense of what's going on. B, which is the Black Empowerment ERG, is just getting ready to kick off their mentoring service. And so we understand the power that mentoring can have, particularly from people, particularly for people who can be traditionally under advocated for. Because there's one thing to be mentored and then there's something else to be advocating. So this is really an opportunity to build relationships. So that's one of the ways. For last month for Pride, we did a screening of a film, and on one of, we have obviously this very large library of content. And so we had a screening on the lawn for, outdoor, COVID safe, of one of our movies. What else? And it definitely, so there's a lot of internal action. I think where we could do better in terms of leveraging these groups is really helping them to face the business more solidly and assist with business decisions. I think part of that, though, is while we do have someone who helps coordinate, the BERG is no one person's job. It ends up being run by volunteers. And so those volunteers actually have other jobs that they're responsible for. And because of that mobilization of that group and in the velocity that we move at as an organization can be difficult when things need to know and need to find out. But I think that is, if you ask me what's the next way that our ERGs could be leveraged to really truly have a business impact, I would love for us to be able to leverage them in that way. I think that would be a game changer. Not just for anybody who could pull that off.
Yeah, along those lines, and maybe it's not happening right now, right? So what connection is there between leadership and these ERGs, right? Like what opportunities are there for them to not only build that sense of community amongst themselves and share, their experiences more broadly throughout the organization, but also to actually, like you're saying, to have an impact on those business decisions. Is there anything at play? Like, are there town halls kind of things where there is an opportunity to share, or is that kind of on the horizon?
No, I think so. We've had town halls. Most of them get together in a meaningful way to help address concerns that are large enough for the entire population to be interested in. And when you talk about the connection between the ERGs and leadership, every ERG has at least 2 executive sponsors.
Great.
And so then that automatically gives that group a direct connection to a very high level of leadership, just by virtue of how it's set up to be managed. When I talk about having a bigger business impact and mobilization, I think that's more around, I don't know. Here's a great one. So we have recently been acquired by Discovery, and the name of the new company is going to be Warner Brothers Discovery. I'll keep my personal opinions about that name to myself, but what I can say very consistently across the board, there's a different levels of how much people like that and how it lands, not just within groups, but within age range, within all of these kinds of things. And this could have been a great place to say, hey, ERGs, here's a random sampling of people. What's your reaction to this name? How does it land? As even almost like a consumer test of sorts, because most of our ERG members are consuming our products and consuming the products of others in some way. So, here's a way to say, hey, as a consumer, how does this land? As a minority, how does this land? As a female, how does this land? What feelings or emotions does it evoke? And I think that's a way we could have been connected to a decision that had great impact and great visibility. That's
great. Yeah, it's really insightful to hear this really wide variety, and we appreciate your candidness, right? With areas for still growth to be happening. I love that idea of crowdsourcing and not just looking at it as a market, but showing that value of your employees' opinions. That's really powerful.
Anyone who tells you that they're where they should be as in terms of DEI,
they're wrong.
Probably not being very honest with themselves or you.
Understandable. Yeah, and I think I was also just really surprised, happily, that there's 2 executive sponsors with each of your ERGs. That's really powerful. And I don't know but it doesn't seem like that's a common practice necessarily in different orgs. And Part of
Well-
that might be personnel, I don't know, but that seems super powerful.
Well, so I've worked for some pretty large organizations throughout my career, and I think any organization over a certain size will always have the ERG be connected by at least one senior leader. But I do think it's great that we have two. Senior leaders can be their time is just so precious and they can get busy. And so when you have the opportunity to have two senior leaders, you always have at least one that you're able to bounce off of. And if you can get both of them in the room at the same time, then even better. The other thing I think we have to think about too is that we're so geographically dispersed. Like we have offices, Atlanta, New York, Burbank, Culver City, there are just a lot of offices and we're spread out across the country and then across the world. So I think that's probably one of our other opportunities as well. Like, how do we involve other groups from across? Because in my experience, our ERGs can be pretty domestic US centric for obvious reasons. But I think there is opportunity in how do we expand those in a meaningful way. To other parts of the world.
Absolutely. And where is there opportunity for integration within that? Where is there opportunity for really honing in on individual populations and letting them thrive in their own ERG? Yeah, what a great debate.
Yeah.
So when you think about all this action that is already happening in Warner Media, what would you consider to be the most significant DE&I improvement?
I think the most significant DEI improvement
so far
would have to be the amount of money that we have invested in our catalog to make sure that we produce and support diverse voices through our product. I mean, not millions, not tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars goes into that. And not every investment yields the kind of return that we just saw with, now I'm struggling to remember the name of this show, but it just won an Emmy for being like best written, and it was written by a young Black woman from the UK. And it's I'm actually embarrassed, I don't know the name of it. But it's
I May Destroy You.
Yes. Thank you.
Camera with the assist.
That is it. And so not all of our investments have the luxury of turning out to be that well received or that well celebrated, but hundreds of millions of dollars into that product so that when viewers turn on the TV, they get to see themselves depicted in some way. And I think it's an amazing thing. And I think her story is an amazing story just in and of itself. She turned down all of these other deals with these other great production organizations to come to a Warner Media where she would be treated and respected in a way that she thought was deserving of her talent. And I think that when you have a story like that, and if I'm not mistaken, now I'm out of my swim lane for sure, but I think the issue was Netflix offered her all of this money and she was like, I don't want money, I want equity.
Nice.
Our girl. And so then I have somebody who's saying that's actually correct. So I hope that's what the thumbs up mean. And so she came to us, Warner Media, and we made a deal that she could get on board with. And so, and look at how it turned out. And so I think it's amazingly insightful of her as a writer, producer, actress. But also too, I think it speaks volumes of the company's willingness to treat people in a way in which they feel honored. And that is, I think that's one of our biggest achievements, and it makes me immensely proud to work for an organization that I can sit and say that about.
Wow, very powerful. I think, and I'm mindful that we want to include some time for Q&A, so I just have a couple more questions for you from me. It's one thing for us to talk about success, but it's another to really be able to back it up. So I'm wondering, how does Warner Media measure effectiveness or success of initiatives? And with that, how are leaders held accountable to those metrics around DE&I?
Sure. We have a very simple measure of success. Did we do what we said we were going to do? And I think that's kind of one of the best measures of success that you can ever really truly have. Yeah, you could go back and say we invested $10,000 with the Black NBA Association to be a gold level sponsor. And yes, we recruited from that sponsorship 15 people, 5 at this level, 5 at this level, 5 at, we could do that and call it a measure of success. But I think the biggest measure of, in my mind, at least, of true success is did we partner in a real and honest way with an organization we claimed we wanted to partner with in a real and honest way. And I think the answer for something like that will turn up in years from now. That's not an immediate impact. I think a lot of the DEI measurements of success are too time bound in a temporal nature that it's too right now to really see what these, because in my mind, these are truly investments that are being made in the future. And so you can't make an well, you can, but most investments don't mature that quickly. And so I think, to try and measure it in the same year, you can get some measurements and you can check some things, check some boxes. But I think the biggest measure is honestly, earnestly, did we do what we said we were going to do? Did we do what we set out to do? And if we set out to be a partner, have we been a good partner? Did the organization feel that they could come to us and say, hey, this is what we need from you, apart from your money? Mm. And I think those are the biggest measurements of true success.
So in closing of our moderated portion of this conversation, I just want to give you the floor. If there's, what else can you tell us? What's inspiring? What can't we miss out on about DE&I at Warner Media that we haven't been able to touch on in this conversation?
Sure. I would like to give 2 things. I'd like to say, number one, I think Warner is an amazing place to work. I think with our partnership and new company coming forward with the Discovery Channel and that new organization, I think it's going to be even more amazing. I think change always represents opportunity, and I would encourage anyone who's interested to definitely go to our website, look at our openings, and know that they're coming to a place where they can be honored and respected. The second thing I would like to say is that I strongly believe that diversity and inclusion and equity is everyone's job. It's not just the people's job who have it in part of their title or sit somewhere in HR. As we kind of define DEI at the top of the conversation, it has the opportunity, if we define it in that way, it has the opportunity to show up in almost every decision, in every role, in every hire, in every fire, and in every choice that we make. And I think if we begin to look at DEI as everyone's responsibility and everyone's job, I think the conversation goes further faster.
I love that final statement. It gave me goosebumps because I think about our own mission as an organization, right? And that was a big push for myself and our founding board members, and for everyone that's joined our mission since. It's seeing this gap and seeing this disparity, right? Like the change comes from the people who are being leaders, and these MBA programs are pushing out leaders. Right. And those folks need to be part of this conversation. They need to be part of the change, and they just need knowledge to be able to do that, and to even know that there are issues, to face that there are issues, and to be empowered to tackle them. So, yeah,
I think the past couple years, and I know we got to enter into our next phase of, having opportunity for question and answer. But I think part of the momentum that came out of the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd moment is that organizations are beginning to really understand that it's hard, particularly for people of color, to just be alive in America today, let alone to be successful in their respective organizations. And part of what makes me respect our organization so strongly is that our CEO, Jason Kylar, came out very strongly, very quickly in support, and very plainly in support of Black Lives Matter. He did not, there's this whole corporate speaking, we all know what that is, and how you can kind of mix it in and say a lot of stuff, but say nothing at the end of the day. If I recall, he sent out this memo, and you could tell he sat somewhere in his house and just kind of hammered it out, and it didn't go through communications. It didn't go through the attorneys. He sent out how he thought and how he felt, and he was extremely clear: Black Lives Matter, full stop. And that's how he started, and that's how he ended. And for the first time in my career, I felt like it was okay for me to be Black at work and not just a professional. And so that has meant and continues to mean a lot to me and for me, and it shows up just in the way I even, I feel like, okay, I can do my job in a much more earnest way because our CEO says he knows that Black Lives Matter. And was very clear, like, right now, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, our Black employees need us to support them right now. Things that might be due at 5, people are dealing with a tremendous amount of emotion. Maybe you don't get it today. Maybe this report is not going to happen today at 5. And he also included some resources, and I was like, wow, what a leader. What a leader, and that's how leaders should show up.
So powerful. Well, I could keep talking to you all day, but it's not about me. So I'm going to step back and bring Pranshu in to help facilitate our Q&A. Dr. Moore, thank you, thank you, thank you. We will thank you some more shortly, but from me to you, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Wow, that was amazing. It was such an intrigueful session, and I took a lot of notes for that. So Dr. Moore, I do have a personal question first, and then, before asking you that question, I would allow everyone who's with us in this call to just put in their questions in the chat or just DM me so that I can moderate the same. But looking at, whatever conversations that you and Amy had today, I just wanted to know, could you briefly exemplify one of the instances which kind of, motivated you to be a part of the DEI as a whole? Like what was your trigger for, having a career within DEI?
So very specifically, I'm in human resources.
Mm-hmm.
So my job, while it includes DEI, I'm not a part of the DEI department. Part of what keeps me, though, in my current role, in my current job, is that I do recognize the disparity and the gatekeeping power that HR plays in an organization. Particularly when we start putting together lists of high performers, just having someone in the room who remembers to ask, is this list representative in the way we would have it to be? Is it future facing and focused, that if we don't put investments into women and minorities today in these training programs that we're looking at or that we're getting ready to send people to, how do we then expect them to show up for promotions in the future?
Yeah.
And making sure that the pipeline gets built. So I'd say that's what keeps me interested. And you asked another interesting question, what was my initial motivation? I'm a Black gay man in America, and I think it lands on me differently than maybe it could land on other people, but I know what it has meant for me, and the difficulties I faced in my career. So I'm like, this is an opportunity for me to lift someone else up in a way and create more equity and opportunity for those around me.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Because this is really, you know, because when you see yourself being put into the shoes of other people, like how their perceptions or how their understanding of the world works, I think that's where, you know, an openness towards the society comes into picture, and you realize that, you know, which things need to change within your environment to bring about a difference in, you know, lives of people.
Absolutely. And I recognize too that my experience is just that. It's my experience, and it should not be and is not representative of everything that everyone else has faced or felt in our organization. So I'm not naive in that way. And I'm also very clear too that I have a very male perspective of looking at things. And not only that, I have a very single. So we start to talk about dimensions of diversity. I'm not married, so I have a very single way of looking at it. I don't have kids, so I don't have the parent perspective as I look at things. And so I think it's about making sure that we always create room for those diverse perspectives to be heard from an equal level of volume.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I do have a question from Luke. He asks, what issues do you run into with the HR restrictions, and how do you balance that with pushing for change?
I'm not sure what Luke means by HR restrictions. If you could say more about that, Luke, I definitely want to answer your question by what you want me to get to. But I can definitely say there's always a balance for change in terms of resources and time. If those are the restrictions, just the regularization, general, okay, gotcha. So businesses are in business to make money, and profit is not a dirty word. So I think that what we have to think about is, number one, shareholder value, and understanding that we truly do believe that shareholder value is increased when there is more diversity and equity and justice in an organization, because we believe the products in general are better, the people work harder, and all of those very right reasons that we do this kind of work. In terms of the kind of just general bureaucracy, I don't know that in Warner there's so much a sense of bureaucracy as there is a sense of competing priorities. DEI work is important, but so is that 5 o'clock deadline. And if I have to push, maybe I could be more inclusive in the conversation, but we don't make the 5 o'clock dead time. And, if the show airs at 5, there's no time, there just kind of isn't, because it's going to go on at 5 and it needs to be ready to go at 5. So I think our biggest issue and our biggest constraint is not so much the bureaucracy as it is the time constraints that we have. The business moves really, really fast. A good example of that, rights and clearances. So if you have watched any show of any type, almost every show has some music, whether it's background music, whether it's a song that's playing on the radio when they walk into, or if they're in a bar, the music's in the background. Every time a song plays in any type of rebroadcast situation, you have to go get permission from whoever owns the right up to that song to use it. And so could we have more diverse choices of music or more diverse selections of music? Sometimes, yeah, but if you already got a clearance sitting on the shelf to use that song however you want to, and you just need a song right now, it's time. Sometimes it's just simple as time. So I'd say that's the main issue for at least as I see it. It's the competing priority of resources with time.
It's a really good answer, and I'm sure that Luke agrees to it. Okay, I do have another question here. Could you please tell me, how does Warner Media avoid bias during the recruitment process? Like, what are some of the measures that you take through just as to avoid any kind of a bias during recruitment?
So I have an interesting answer to that, and I'm going to start off by saying that I think bias is unavoidable. I think the trick is acknowledging that bias exists in the system and then figuring out ways to balance your bias. And I think part of the ways we do that is we're really big on group interviews. We're really big on multiple interviews. And so, if anyone ever applies, you'll see that you talk to a recruiter, then you talk to another recruiter, then you talk to the hiring manager, then you talk to your client or whoever this would be interfacing chiefly with. Then you'll talk to some other level of leadership. I don't think we hire anybody to do anything without at least a few interviews. And I think that gives us an opportunity to sort through our biases and land on someone who's truly qualified. But I think you got to start with a diverse pool of applicants and candidates for the job.
Because I also feel that, whenever you're going through those many rounds of interviews, and every person has a perception of you, right? Which eventually leads on to removing any sort of a personal bias that, any individual might be having towards or against you, right?
Yeah, or at least with that many layers of biases heaped upon a person, you can at least hope that it normalizes across everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So if in that case, if any of the students or any individual per se is, looking to transition into a career within DE&I, right? Could you kindly, shed some light on some of the reading materials or any advice you'd like to give to those people as to how to start with this transition?
Sure. Anyone who's interested in a career in DEI should, in my opinion, my very humble opinion, begin by educating themselves on what structural racism is and how those systems, what those systems are, how they perform, and how they impact business from just a structural standpoint. I think there you can take that information and apply it to a business lens internally in an organization and begin to think about what are the structures that we have in this organization that exist that discriminate, whether it was intentionally or not, on candidates, whether they be internal or external candidates, for promotion and increase in scope of work.
Yeah.
I think if you start from there and you can really develop a true passion around this type of work and you decide I want to try to do this full time, then I think it will have shown up because you'll be working with the ERGs. You'll be participating with the ERGs. You will be a voice for change in the organization. And I think from there, it's a very easy jump to make to be in the DEI department, because you know all the people, you're doing the work to a great extent anyway, and now it'll just become your full-time job. Smaller organizations where there is no DEI department, simply making sure leadership, not making sure, that's not a good choice of words, simply encouraging leaders where possible to create inclusive or opportunities for inclusion, remembering, Black History Month, remembering Trans Identity Day or whatever the time frame is, but remember, trying to remember to bring these things to the forefront so that different groups of people can be seen and heard, I think is a good place to start, even if even if the organization you work for doesn't have a DEI person.
Yeah.
Even if they don't have an HR person, because not all organizations these days have an HR person, but taking the responsibility of bringing these things to the forefront of thought goes a long way.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, because it has been, very important for people to ideally recognize what's the problem first and then go for a solution instead of just jumping onto the solution first without recognizing, whatever surrounds the problem in hand, right? Well, after this, I think this was the last question, and this is like, a really amazing session we had with you, Dr. Moore. I would pass it on to Cameron so that she could, uh, close in the session with us. Again, thank you so much for joining us for this session. I think it was really, really insightful for all the students who were able to join today. And I wish you a very good week for the rest.
Thank you. You as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Pranshu. And thank you all for those amazing questions. Next, we do want to have some time for you all to share some moments of reflection. As Pranshu just said, this was an amazing and really insightful session. And Dr. Moore, we appreciate you sharing your insights and your wisdom. So if anyone has any amazing aha moments, key takeaways, or inspirations that they would like to share, please feel free to raise your hand. And I will take you off of mute so that you can share those verbally. Or if you feel more comfortable, you will be able to share those in the chat. And I will go first. Mr. Moore, I thank you again for this amazing session. And I think one of the key points was at the top, the breakdown that you did of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just talking about the community that it builds. That really helped me to see it in a different light. And then also, it just touched me to hear how you spoke about your leader, the CEO, and how his response was to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I myself am transitioning from a nonprofit workspace and back into corporate. And one of my fears was that I would be going into a space where I wouldn't be able to show up as myself. So to know that those spaces exist, and it exists at Warner Media was helpful. So I thank you for sharing that. And I think we have one in the chat. Amy just said DEI is everyone's job. Absolutely. Yes, that was another huge hit. Awesome. And as you guys continue to share your aha moments, I'm going to once again share ways for you to connect with SDEIB. And you can feel free to take a screenshot, grab your phone, take a photo. I think Amy posted the links in the chat earlier. And once again, if no one else has any amazing moments or key takeaways to share, I want to thank Dr. Moore and Amy again for a wonderful conversation. Hold on, we got something in the chat. Awesome. Amy said the presentation will also be shared with you the event. Thank you for that. And thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of the day. And stay tuned for more of our programming, and take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Moore, thank you so much. This was great insights and